live now.
Give me a hand signal.
And hopefully make you laugh. Stu and the Nunn is a show focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on our show chat room, via our Facebook page, and on Twitter.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nunn here on this mighty October 24th. Thank you for joining us here at 8 p.m., 2000 Eastern for you military folks. 7 Central, and I guess that's 5 Pacific here on Stu and the Nunn, stewandthenunn.com. And this is the Stu and the Nunn Show with this is Stu. And as you can see over on my side, on the other side of that good-looking fella in the middle is the Nunn. And, we got our good buddy Rusty Bradley here with us tonight, author of the book, critically acclaimed, awesome book, Lions of Kandahar, with us in the middle, riding in the rocking chair there. Hey, Rusty, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Toby, how you doing, brother?
I'm living the dream, man. I apologize. I'm like working the computer screen here, making sure that people in all the social webs, interwebs, dark webs know that we're up and going. But I'm doing good, man. Just back from another great Veteran Outdoors hunt. A couple record-setting things for Veteran Outdoors this past weekend. One being a white-tailed deer that's off the charts. But other than that, man, I'm excited to be back in civilization with warm water, showers, and a toilet that works. And I had a toilet that works out there, so I don't want anyone to think I didn't.
You're a dude. You're a dude. You always have a toilet that works everywhere you go. It's the nice part of being a dude.
Called creation.
Awesome. Well, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to have a dead air there. I thought you were going to keep on talking. Yeah, so we are glad to be back. We're glad to welcome our good friend Rusty back. He's been on the show a few times. And we asked Rusty to be back on. I was going to get a blog post up today to announce that. I did not. That thing called the day job kind of kept me from getting all my show duties done. But I don't know how much traction we get off that anyways. We seem to get more off when people start tuning in, which they all seem to be doing right now. So, again, want to welcome Rusty to the show. Good to have Toby back. He was out doing great stuff, hunting wild animals, and more importantly, giving veterans awesome experiences. Right? That's really the goal of Veteran Outdoors, is that experience that these guys get that they probably thought they'd never get, or maybe never have.
That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Yep. So, hey, Rusty, you haven't been with us a while. Again, welcome back. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Good deal.
Trying to stay busy so I can get some of that hunting time that your partner in crime has been getting in.
Yeah. Don't be jealous. Get out there.
Yeah, I think Rusty might be. It looks like there's something hanging up behind him there. I bet he can put a sight on an animal too. He may be able to give you some pointers there, Toby. I don't know.
Oh, he absolutely can. I talk a lot of smack, but he's got 2 things on his wall that I don't. So, well, I might have a lot of experiences, and I might have guided a lot of things and skinned and pulled guts out of them. He's got 2 things on his wall that I don't. So I deeply admire his ability, and that's just my insecurities coming through when I trash talk.
I didn't realize we were going to talk about back when you were dating, but just saying. But yeah. Uh-oh, it's got some vibrating going on there. So, anyways, yeah, well, good to have you guys on. Rusty, a lot of things going on in the news, a lot of stuff happening. Before we get into the topic of the night, just kind of open up for our viewers and listeners. Is there anything hot and heavy going on in your life? Any awesome events going on, or things happening you just want our listeners and viewers to be aware of before we get into tonight's show topics?
No, I mean, pretty much. Obviously, the op tempo is increasing. Very thankful to myself to have finally laid on a full-time job, which I'm sure will make my wife very happy. So now I've just got to figure out how I can combine all of my hobbies into what I was using the excuse of having them as my jobs, and now they've got to become hobbies. And I'll be asking you how you manage to do everything behind a daytime job to pay the bills. So I'll probably be hitting you up for advice here pretty soon. But nope, my daughter's in college now, which is a huge step. So she's down in South Carolina, learning the intricacies of navigating the campus life. And Kevin and I are actually right now, we are working on, we got asked to write another book. So we are looking at putting together the proposal for that. And I'd like to come to you guys to be the first announcement once we get it locked in. And the proposal date for when it's going to hit the market.
Oh, dude, that'll be awesome.
You had my attention at book, Rusty. I love that stuff. I'm excited to hear what you guys got coming out.
I did want to ask you real quick, have you guys seen the new documentary? I did want to throw a few words out for some of my buddies in fifth group. There's a new documentary. It's not brand new, but it came out. It's called Legion of Brothers. It airs on CNN, and it's probably aired about 6 or 7 times now. But the documentary is about the first series of teams that went into Afghanistan and the kind of the trials and tribulations that the teams have gone, some of the team members have gone through since they got back from Afghanistan and their careers and what direction they took. So it's kind of good to see some Army guys and some Army projects that are not some primetime news outlet hallucinogenic Hollywood stories.
Yeah, it's an awesome documentary. Our good friend Jason Emery, who led one of those teams in. In fact, I got Jason right here for anyone that doubts me. That is Jason was the model for America's Army little 4 action figures, and I found it on eBay and bought a brand new set for Jason, but I got all 3. But that's Jason, so he always sits above my desk in the ready. Whenever I have questions, if I have doubts, I look to Jason and ask him for advice. He doesn't talk a lot, but I know what he's thinking. But yeah, no, he's in it. His team is featured in it. You're right. A direct action team and the team from the North, known as the Horse Soldiers, are given that nickname. Yeah, it's a great documentary. Like you said, it's not only about some things that happened there, but it covers kind of life after they got back, some of their reflections, and I think it is a very good, honest perspective of just what it's like to have served in those kind of units. Different than I think some other special op units, which love to have their hair flow in the breeze and have big explosions and things like that. And the quiet professional of the special forces. I think those guys continue to hold that up, and I think the documentary does a good job at capturing the human side, including and especially the family side.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that's probably most appealing about it is, the wives and the kids are the ones who kind of just because they wear a uniform doesn't mean they didn't serve their country, because they were holding down the forts and giving us a reason to go out there and put blood, brains, and balls on the wall for the nation. So as when you know that things are taken care of, your kids are being protected and provided for at home, then it makes it easier. And I think that's one of the aspects that the documentary does a good job of, is actually talking to the wives and discussing some of the experiences that they went through. I mean, gosh, some of these guys went through. A good friend of mine named Mark, who's on that team. I mean, between being a DoD contractor and his military service, I think he's deployed like 20 something times.
Oh man.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely, it just shows that, but it's great. It's on Netflix. You can pick it up there on Netflix's DVD service, at least. I don't know about their streaming. And like you said, it's done by CNN, and I think they did a good job, a respectful job, portraying, like say, some of the truth perspective. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, man. We're working to have Jason back on the show. We've talked to him pretty frequently. Just trying to guide up schedules to have him come back on and talk about that a little bit. But
I look forward to it. Like I said, I'm looking forward to hopefully a lot more soldiers, or excuse me, stories about different soldiers from different services and contributions, because there's so many great stories. It doesn't matter what branch of service it is. It doesn't, people seem to be enamored with special operations or special forces, but I mean that's not inclusive or exclusive at all. There's a tremendous amount of great stories that are out there, and that's the stuff that the American people need to know, is what goes on the heroism that goes on their behalf that they don't know about, that happens almost every single day. And if it doesn't get if it doesn't get put in a book or a documentary or on a movie, people don't know about it. And there's some incredible stories about the 3%.
You're absolutely correct. And one of the things I think we're seeing that cycle, right? And entertainment's cyclical, and we're starting to see a rash of just atrociously horrible Hollywood shows coming out. Like SEAL Teams, Team 6, Valor. Just off the top of my head, all major network things. I've had the displeasure of seeing a couple pilots from some of them, and just like absolutely disappointed in the offerings that are going on. However, there are some good movies coming out. 12th Man, Thank You for Your Service is actually, I've heard some really great things about it. Kyle Hausman Stokes, a really good friend of mine, one of my soldiers and founders of Veterans in Film and Television, went to the premiere last night, and he said that was really good. But it just seems like there's a gap. There's a gap of reality and what's good, truthful, historical storytelling. Not many guys get it right. Like the Burns of the world that get it right with World War II, and absolutely got it right with Vietnam, from what I can understand, talking to guys that served and watched that documentary recently. Not many people get it right. But Legion of Brothers is a great one, because it kind of shows like not just a tiny moment in time. It gives a good brushstroke across what's all involved and who's all involved and why they're all involved. And we're starting to see some good things come out to kind of replace, like, for lack of a better term, like the crap that Hollywood's doing. Like, I gotta give a shout out to my man Daniel Eric from Grunt Style, up in the house, the founder of the Veteran Radio Syndicate. He's in the chat room. Got to give him a shout out. Good guy.
is he awesome? Yeah.
It's so good to see Daniel out there.
And speaking of Grunt Style, we got to mention we have to mention our big sponsor, our main sponsor. Toby and I are both sporting our Enlisted 9 Fight Company shirts on tonight. Toby, I see you're wearing your Mad Dog shirt.
Always Mad 2020.
That's it. So we got to get Rusty one of these Enlisted 9 shirts. He's got to sport him some of that. But yeah, they are teamed up with Grunt Style. So glad to see. Where do you see Daniel? I don't see him. Which chat are you seeing him in? I am.
Maybe it's on mine. Oh no, it's right on Stu and the Nunn.
Is it?
He's there. He's right there, living large.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to keep an eye. So good deal. Yeah. So anyways, Toby, did you anything else you want to get into before we get into tonight's topics?
No, like I know Rusty's a busy guy, and I I've just been bombarded with questions that are really out of my wheelhouse due to my experience level. And anytime I get bombarded with these questions, I lean on guys like Tim Kennedy. I lean on Justin Lakeums. I lean on guys, and the fact that we got Rusty today is just fantastic because I really have some questions that only a man of his accomplishment and experience can really answer. And I know that a lot of these have come in private message via Twitter or different things. So really excited to ask some of these questions about Rusty, his experience and his knowledge base as a subject matter expert. But before we get into it, I just want to let's kind of just jump back on Rusty a little bit and just remind everyone in our listening audience exactly who we have on the air.
Absolutely. So, Rusty Bradley, you are, retired major, Special Forces, considered a Mustang. You were prior enlisted, right? Prior to being an officer, and had, excuse me if I abuse this, I want to say 7 or 8 deployments. The 8? Yeah. And now retired, like I say, living the dream. And doing great things, and an author, like I say, of the book Lions of Kandahar, a phenomenal piece of work that describes, rather than a whole bunch of all your deployments, but really one distinct deployment and one distinct operation, Medusa in 2006 in a southern part of Afghanistan. I was just up to your northeast. And about an operation that really I'm pretty sure no one ever heard of or knew anything about until you took the time and effort to put pen to paper and exemplify the brave and awesome work that your soldiers did. Did I leave anything else, Rusty? Please tell me if I screwed anything up.
No, I mean, like I said, you hit everything. That, in short, the reason I wrote the book was I saw, like we were just joking about earlier, but in reality, I saw here ordinary men do extraordinary things, and I was so amazed by it, and it was so surreal that I could not memorialize what they did by not at least trying to tell people about it. And again, I kind of look at myself as fairly average, kind of a third string quarterback who was lucky enough to come on to a Super Bowl quality team, and was lucky enough to honestly be able to say that I walked with heroes, and that was the reason I wrote it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and it's definitely, if you haven't checked it out, go to Amazon, look it up, Lions of Kandahar. You will not be disappointed. And if anything, you will just be shocked and in awe, for sure. But yeah, and like Toby said, there have been a lot of talking heads, a lot of pontificators over the last few days about this operation in Niger that happened, and where we lost 4 brave souls that were had raised their right hand and had went out and done probably a lot of other awesome things even before this. But the odds are you throw enough bullets in the air, regardless of your amount of training, sometimes you're just going to get hit, no matter how well trained and prepared you are. And even though we're lacking a lot of the details, at which we probably should be, because it's not really too early for us to even know, nor it may ever be any of our business, because of a lot of reasons, it has gotten a lot of attention for sure. So it is, we're kind of having you on tonight. I did a little series the other day we started called The Tactical Pause. I took a few minutes, and for those that are wondering what the tactical pause is, my buddy Doug, who's watching, will like this. It's pretty much a moment when things are getting out of control, or maybe people need to get themselves reset and get their head on straight. You kind of take a pause, think about what you're doing, change your socks, drink some water, take some Motrin, take a knee, get reset, and get back on the mission. Charlie Mike. So you know, I kind of did that. I talked about it a little bit. Being someone that's born in Fort Bragg, born in the Special Forces world, lived my whole life there before I went on to serve myself. I felt maybe I had a little bit of qualification to talk about it. I definitely know about the mission well, as far as the mission of what Special Forces has always been. But I'm glad you're able to join us tonight and give us a little bit more perspective about kind of what the Green Beret mission is, which may be foreign to a lot of people who have only known about it from what they've seen in TV or the movies, or they mix it up with other special operation forces. Because you know, unfortunately, it's called Special Forces, but sometimes the ignorant people, and I don't mean that in a bad way, ignorant, you just don't know. I don't mean it in a negative connotation. Will sometimes call all of our special operation forces Special Forces. You know, no matter what uniform they wear, and they are special. But they're not the Special Forces. So glad you could join us tonight. But
thank you for having. Thanks for clearing that up too, because you get so many people that think that they understand what they're saying. Words do matter. There is only one organization called the U.S. Special Forces. You're absolutely right. Everybody else is Special Operations Forces. So you've got SEALs, Ranger, you know, Delta, CCTs and STS, Air Force, you know, combat controllers. You've got a myriad of people that are out there, but they all fall under MARSOC, but they all fall under the umbrella of Special Operations Forces.
PJs, don't forget the PJs. There'll be an Air Force guy that pipes up.
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of one of those things you're scared to go into talking about it because you're afraid you're going to leave somebody out and somebody will send you a nasty little text, you know, email or something.
Oh, but, what 160th? We got to remember them too. You mentioned STS. Oh, yeah. 160th. And if anyone else is special, just put your hockey helmet on and go lick a window. Sorry,
that's right. Get on your very, very short yellow C-130 and practice your
PLFs. There you go.
PLFs. There you go.
But
no, the Special Forces essentially have. At one time, doctrines changed a little bit, but we have 7 core missions that we train on. You know, you've got unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense, which is our bread and butter. You know, we also do special reconnaissance, direct action. We do intelligence collection. We do psychological operations, civil affairs. And when you look at that myriad of capabilities, what it really boils down to is there's only one organization in the world that can either build a country or destroy it. And that's the U.S. Special Forces. And you take that combination of all of those mission capabilities and you work by, with, and through the indigenous people in an attempt to prevent an escalation in U.S. or coalition forces in order to accomplish that mission. So when you're looking at conducting foreign internal defense, you're not just sending people there to teach them basic rifle marksmanship and personal hygiene or how to, you know, drill and ceremony. You have to do it in their culture, in their language, in their, you know, their region or their area of the world. You're doing it most of the times while living in extremely austere conditions. You're building personal relationships and rapport with those people. So when people want to kind of bleed over and say that they can do the same missions that Special Forces are doing, the truth is they can't, because they're not recruited, trained, equipped, operationalized, funded, and can execute what a small broken down sub team can do with Special Forces. And it's just, you know, from being a combat multiplier to, you know, working, like I said, by, with, and through indigenous forces, that takes a specific skill set that is honed over years, and not just because somebody, you know, has a host nation or a country that's targeted that needs some assistance, and you think you can throw anybody on an airplane and send them over there to start working with.
Right. That kind of reminds me, not to offend anyone, not that I really care, but of people that I don't know do a foot patrol in Baghdad or do a convoy or con op in Kabul, and then they say, well, I'm infantry. I did the same thing the infantry guy did. Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I get a CIB? Because I rode down the road like they did, and I had to react to contact, and you know, we shot our way out of the zone and moved out, and so we're the same thing. So I get you, right? People deploy all over. They do things. They may do something similar to what special forces do. Heck, I can. When I was back on jump status, I could call an aircraft and set up a drop zone. That doesn't mean I was a PJ, you know. And even if I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express, you know, but no, I mean it's a good point. And I think one reason I wanted to have you on and I want to talk about is I think the how the people in our country just were not aware, because I mean there were some questions, people saying, what were we doing in Niger, why were we there, why were there special forces there, are we at war there? And it just kind of caught me. I shouldn't have, but it caught me off guard to think, are you that ignorant? Like you not realize we're in the especially special forces are all over in South America, Africa, Central America, Southwest Asia, you know, Ukraine. They're all over the place. They're deploying all the time, and it's not super secret. I mean, it is when they deploy, but we don't give that up. But after the fact, there's enough of it's out there in the public world. Does it surprise you that people are still that ignorant after 16 years of war, that if we're not in front of a news camera, then there's obviously we're not there?
No, nothing surprises me anymore at the level of ignorance that uh, is out there. When you try to explain to them, um, I have been on another major network trying to explain uh, in an interview how vast our reach is. I mean, at any one given time, we've got the U.S. Special Forces has thousands of troops and support troops in about 50 different countries or more in the world every day. And that really kind of, when I was a company commander, that really struck home to me, because I'm trying to support where these guys are at all over the world. And it's hard to believe sometimes that we have that much outreach. Our organization has a global outreach and a strategic impact in the world. But they're talking right now, for example, about whether or not they're going to release the JFK files. Well, there are certain things that are left in the shadows for a reason. And the problem is we live in not just a society, but within generations now that are all about instant gratification. You've got politicians that everybody who's not read on or doesn't necessarily need to know, all of a sudden want to know how many troops we have in every single country and what we're doing. And the truth is they don't always need to know. And the almost the narcissism is that they think that because they hold an office, that they are supposed to know, and they're not. That's part of what keeps us safe, is you don't publicize when we are sending troops to a certain area. You don't emphasize when we are working with certain countries or whatever we're doing. Not every bit of it needs to be on the nightly news, because it defeats our efforts and it globalizes and informs the many, many, many enemies that the United States has. We've been looking at working or trying to put emphasis into Africa, because that is the place where most of these insurgent groups and organizations are either fleeing to or training or working at taking over. And the inkling of that started back in 93 in Somalia. And people just kind of mistakenly thought that that was some sort of anomaly, and that level of extremism wasn't taking place right under their nose. But unfortunately, the, as affluent and well informed as our society is, everybody seems to think that, you know, as long as it doesn't interfere with them getting in their, um, you know, their compact car or their oversized suburban, you know, and their massive homes and then driving to Starbucks to get a coffee. You know, the only thing they're worried about is the price of gas. And then all of a sudden, when something happens, there's this knee jerk reaction that everybody thinks that they need to know what's, you know, the details of what's going on. And that's not the case in every aspect.
So, we're talking tonight with Rusty Bradley, former retired Special Forces, Army Special Forces Major, a former company commander within the Special Forces community. And we're talking about what the mission of the United States Army Special Forces is. And, you know, we've talked about foreign indigenous defense, pardon me, foreign internal defense. We've talked about unconventional warfare. And Rusty, one of the things that, you know, just to kind of caveat and bootstrap on what you were just saying about being in 50 different countries at any given time with thousands of troops and troops in support, is that when we were doing the war on terror, the op tempo of the United States military was extremely high. The bandwidth was as stretched as it could possibly be stretched. And especially during a previous administration where there was a lot of downsizing. Um, the unconventional warfare piece is extremely critical. And it's one of those pieces that we have in our arsenal. It's one of the things that we have in our tactical toolbox, if you will, that separates us from many other of world nation leading nation leading nations of the world. You would think I have been drinking or something. The the fact that we have these young men, these trained young men that understand the cultural significance of where they're at, the financial and economic. I mean, this really is PhD level stuff that we're trusting to these young men to do. You know, they have to meet with the cultural leaders. They have to establish relationships and rapport with the cultural leaders. They have to figure out how to fit uh, the internal defense of their nation in and match it up with the cultural demands and the cultural pressures. There's so much to this that we have a hard time. Like you were just saying, uh, in terms of we don't need to tell everybody everything that we're doing, but we have a hard time just doing the training of that within our nation before it gets spoiled, before people leak information, before people ruin that and make it hard. We learned that with Jade Helm a couple years back here in the Republic of Texas. The the state of our unconventional warfare is is the best it is that it can be in the world. But do you think that we need to like build it up more? Do you think we need to expand upon it? And is this something that when we're expanding upon it, do you think this falls into one of the other seven missions you were talking about being civil affairs? Is do we need to like do a better job of explaining to the public like trust us, you know, trust but verify, give it to Ronald Reagan, be like, when something goes bad, yeah, we'll bring it up to light. We'll figure out how to address it. But for the most part, trust us because we're the tip of the spear, and we don't want you to see where the tip's going to strike.
First of all, you kind of answered my question for me. That's exactly what needs to be said and needs to be told. Typically, people don't want to hear that. And the problem is that, say, for example, you get a political commentator. They will ask these very difficult questions and they will be very intrusive. It could be a politician. And they expect to know the answer, but it's always one sided. The one of the downfalls that I see with our highly informed society today is people have this concept that they deserve an answer for things that they don't, because they don't have a dog in that hunt, if you will. They don't have a need, what we call a need to know. And if you turn around, for example, and ask that politician or that commentator, well, how much is your annual salary? How much do you make running this show? They get very offended, and it's the quickest way for that I can get them to understand that that is the same kind of question that you're asking me, because as a service member or as a member of military, our job is to protect the nation against all threats, foreign and domestic. Well, you can't do that if somebody is publicizing or questioning every decision that is made. We talk about, the military being this force that should be able to go out and be given a mission to accomplish a task, and then they are well trained, well equipped, well educated, and then they're supposed to be sent off to accomplish that task. And we hope that we don't have people show up in the middle of what we're trying to do and say, well, why are you doing it this way? Or why are you doing it this way? The analogy that I like in that case is I would not let my spinal surgeon change the motor in my truck, and I wouldn't let my mechanic do spinal surgery. Each one are experts in their field, but they both have two complete different missions and two complete different areas of expertise. And all too many times, they have a reason for what they're doing and how they're doing it. And a lot of times you have only so much equipment and time and resources to work with, and you have a mission that you have to accomplish. And when you're told to conduct that mission, there's no, you don't go back and say, well, I don't think I have enough people, or I don't have enough vehicles, or I don't have enough money. You don't go back, and that's not even a consideration. You execute with what you have. And we have learned to do in the past 8 years, we have learned to do more with less. And the problem is now that less has become the standard with which we look at something, a mission, whether it's conducting a medical aid mission to a village, or whether we're doing a kinetic operation, and we're willing to assume risk because we know that we're not going to get any more resources that we need. What you have is what you play the game with. And if you've only got X amount, you can try to get more, but that X amount is all you have. I just get very frustrated because I see people asking questions. Well, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? It's very difficult because, number one, you're doing what you agree to do legally, morally, ethically, by serving your country and fulfilling your job. But when you get people that come behind you after the fact, because it's a misnomer to think that every single mission is going to turn out like a Hollywood movie and end the way that you want it. Your team's going to win and everything's hunky dory and everybody goes home and it's all happy. That's not the way warfare is. And we're good at what we do. Problem is there is an enemy out there that always has a vote. And sometimes things happen that you can't even predict. You can't plan. Our military decision-making process, our planning process is the most thorough and inclusive process that any military has ever done. And these guys do this every single time they go outside the wire, and they do the best that they can to plan for contingencies, but not everything not everything turns out the way that you think it is. There's an IED in the road that you didn't see, or there's a collapsed bridge, or a freak storm comes in, or a vehicle breaks down, or somebody gets sick. I mean, or there's an enemy where you don't expect them to be. You try to plan for those things, but it gets very difficult because it just seems like everybody wants to be a critic. Everybody wants to be an armchair quarterback. And if we had as many people that, instead of being we have a saying, be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Okay. I would never believe that anybody who is a part of that mission, or any mission going on anywhere in the world, would not do everything in their power to make that mission successful, because whether you're a commander or a senior NCO, you have two tasks. That's it: the accomplishment of the mission and the welfare of the men. But they're in that order for a reason, because that's what makes us successful. The third part of that people typically don't understand is unity of command and unity of effort. In an organization like Special Forces, more often than not, compared to a conventional unit, you get a vote at the round table. You get to have a part of the planning process, and you get to have a say, or at least voice your opinion. And I don't know, it's just hard for me to believe that people want to come out and criticize every single thing that happens and jump on top of.
Yeah, Rusty, you hit a lot of topics there. I want to. I've been building a list of where you.
Sorry, I got long-winded, but
that's all right. That's all right. Yeah, that's why you're an awesome guest. So one thing you hit on was something that our former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld said when he was asked that question in Iraq about why they didn't have up-armored Humvees, right? And he said, "We go to war with the army we have, not the one we wish we have." We've all seen that. Earlier at the start of the show, we were talking about Legion of Brothers, and the fame now, the movies coming out about the horse soldiers, the SF team that came in from the north. They probably didn't plan, nor was it anywhere in their planning process, to come in and fall in on horses and have everyone ready to know how to ride. In fact, I think only one guy had really had any riding experience. They did not expect to have to conduct combat operations against a major enemy element on horseback. Just the same as Jason's team that came from the south, just the same as anything else. I'm sure Toby had missions he went on that he would have loved to have a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. I know when I was in ETT, there was no shortage of things I wish I would have had when I was downrange. But you get what you get, and you, like you said, you make the best of it. You don't turn around and come back in the wire and say, "I'm not going out because I need 3 more Humvees." You're given a mission. You say, "Charlie, Mike," you move out. But you hit on something else that I wanted to key on. I wasn't going to plan to till you said it, and that was the 2 primary missions, right? Which is accomplishment of the mission and the welfare of your men. And what I have seen, what I have noticed, is that was flip flopped during the mid 2000s when and I've said this a number of times on this show and other shows. I think a big downfall to a lot of things, or a lot of mistakes or things that happened, were a result of the zero tolerance policies that the military, especially the Army that I can speak to, developed in the 90s. And I used to say all the time, the OER, the Officer Evaluation Report, has been a single one contributor to more things bad happening than anything else, because I've seen it firsthand where leaders, they just happen to be officers, they get, as you know, and maybe our listeners don't, they only so many can be this certain percentage, and only so many can be rated at this percentage. So there's a lot of competition where NCOs, and at least when I was in, didn't have that kind of rating system where you're peered against your other folks. But I saw a flip-flop of where people were more concerned about the welfare of their men, and that may have even meant not going outside the wire or doing the mission, than they were accomplishment of the mission. They felt that the only way they could be marked as success is to bring everyone back, even if they just sat inside the wire for a majority of the time. And somewhere in that time frame, and I think it was because of those time frames in the 90s and 2000s, that flip flopped. Everyone thought that was the real measurement of success, and I think that is something that has to be turned back. But man, I don't know how you're going to do it because you're talking about a generation ago of soldiers that used to know it when it was mission first, men always. Right
Well, I
now,
mean, that talks to winning, right? Like, that's. I mean, we can take you break this down fundamentally to participation trophies. Like, if you're more concerned with everyone having fun and making it home, that you're not focused on winning. And sometimes pawns gotta die for the king to get captured. And you know this that's why this unconventional warfare training like needs to we need more of it. We need to like get back to our roots, get back to basics, start looking at ways to win. Let's figure out how to get into different places. Let's figure out how to build these relationships. Let's like, not everything is hearts and minds. A wise man by the name of Colonel Buck James once said in a great formation that when you go to a fight, you don't go to make friends, you go to make fertilizer. And if you're there to make friends, well, you're not there to win.
right? Absolutely. And I want to hit on one more thing. That was a good point, Toby. But the thing you said, Rusty, about the last 8 years, all they've gotten used to doing more with less. Um, and it sounds like you feel or you've and or seen that has now become that has now become the bar to meet, right? Is that just a plan? And that's different than I think than saying, well, you don't have everything to go to war with. You go with war with what you got. Than saying we're cutting things back, and those things may be enablers, combat multipliers. They may be lifesavers, or maybe it's you're not getting the experienced people you should get, and that reason I'm mentioning that dovetails into my next question, and not that or even comment. You can answer and you want, but this team, these four NCOs that were killed in Niger. I mean, when I remember the days of the special forces, that you may have an E6 on the team, but they were pretty much E7s, in E8, E8 or two, captains, majors. I mean, that's the way they were made up. Mostly captains, and it's maybe some one or two lieutenants, maybe like you would have one or two E6s. But to have three special forces soldiers and a light wheeled mechanic, um, on a mission. I just wonder because they did say they've done this same thing 29 times before, probably something like a Shura or whatever they were doing, where they were meeting with the elders. Do you think they felt either that safe where they could not need as many senior people, or has that community gotten in that aspect where they're having to put more junior folks in the senior positions?
I think the best way to look at it is um, don't get wrapped up around the axle about rank, because you have four very competent men that are out there, probably part of a larger element, that are out there that are fully qualified and capable to do their job, and that's exactly what they were doing. And to say that it should be one thing or the other means that I don't want to. I would not say that, because I know, first of all, that you know, there is an exceptional standard compared to society for someone to serve in the military, and then it's even higher when you earn your Green Beret. Those men were out there, and they were fully capable of accomplishing their mission, and it's part of the reason why I get upset about hearing people make comments about, well, they should have had this and they should have had that, or they should have done this and they should have done that. Those guys had done the same mission numerous other times, and because nothing happened, it never raised an eyebrow. So to me, it questions who they are, their capability, and I don't believe people should go down that road. You know and understand when you volunteer to be in the U.S. Special Forces that your those crossed arrows are on your regimental crest for a reason. They're on that insignia for a reason, because you can have all the greatest technology in the world, but it comes down to the basics of warfare that allow you to succeed on the battlefield. That's what I saw during my 12, 14 years in special forces, was guys executing the basics on a regular basis. And that was how 99% of the time we were able to come out on top and our enemy weren't. But again, there are always going to be those instances where, it's just a matter of math, that eventually something is going to happen that you cannot have planned for. And I don't want to question the capability of those 4 soldiers and them executing their mission because some politician or some talking head, or some commentator on a TV show that's looking for ratings wants to come along after the fact and say, well, why didn't they have this? Why didn't they have that? Because they didn't have that for the 29 other missions that they did, because they're trained to operate in those austere and hostile environments. And they did a damn phenomenal job, and nobody knew anything about it. And that's the sort of stuff that goes on every day. And at some point, part of the problem that I have with this information and social media and all the technology that's advanced, it's become a detriment, because now, we saw that overwhelmingly in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places in the world that, that we were working in. What they've done is they've now allowed these commanders and senior NCOs to now be able to become team leaders again. So you don't have the autonomy to go someplace and do your job, because the information is so fluid that people want to get involved in decision making that is yours and should be yours alone on the ground, because you're the person there fighting that fight, living that experience. You know your strengths and weaknesses, and you should be the one to determine how you operate, where you operate to the best of your ability. And yes, if I don't doubt for one second that everybody always wants more than what they have available. But this goes back to a little bit to what I was starting to talk about, which is unity of command and unity of effort. At the end of the day, what has made the U.S. military, the U.S. soldier, better than the U.S. soldier has allowed the United States of America to become the military power it has, because of that belief in unity of effort, unity of command. So people may or may not get their vote at the table, but at the end of the day, you believe that your leaders are making the decisions that are best for you. And sometimes those are difficult decisions, and you're going to execute as aggressively as if that was your plan and you had planned it yourself, and that's why you were executing it. You don't always agree with everything that goes on around you, but you're going to, move out aggressively, violence of action, overwhelming fire superiority, engage and destroy the enemy, and keep on moving. You become that unstoppable force of nature that 9 times out of 10 is going to overwhelm the enemy. But that in and of itself is what, to me, has always made me admire the American soldier. And you hear this very same thing from, military leaders, political leaders, and generals from other countries, because they know that that's our greatest That's our greatest weapon. The American soldier himself is the greatest weapon, and they're out there doing what they agreed and volunteered to do, and they're doing it more proficiently and accurately than most of these other countries are, that they're forcing people to serve in the military. I hate that it was a tragedy, and the problem is that's the nature of warfare.
Yeah, no, let's I deeply, deeply admire some of the things that you've just said. And I kind of want to circle back real fast because it's interesting how, like, all of a sudden we have all these, tactical experts, right? We have all these people like speaking up and criticizing, and this recent event has become somewhat politicized. I can't help but compare it to a special operations event that happened in Afghanistan, where there was a pretty substantial firefight. Guys were caught, uh, and a guy ended being found a long distance away from the rest of his guys, and that turns into a Hollywood movie, and he's celebrated. And I'm not passing judgment on anyone's performance. I'm just utilizing that as an example to say that in one circumstance, because we were, knowingly engaged in war, people like hailed those guys as heroes. Okay, it's awesome. Like horribly planned and executed mission. Like you won't find a military person that'll probably argue that. But yet, like they're hailed as heroes. Hollywood makes a movie, and we got some millionaires, out of some books. But we're in a place that people don't know about because they don't understand the complexities of what the war on terror is. They don't realize that one of the number one recruiting beds for Al Qaeda and ISIS and many of these radicalized groups that are at war with the West, not just America, the West, are coming out of the dark continent. They don't know that they're coming out of these places, and they don't know about the political instability. I mean, how many countries in the last decade had civil war within that continent? You know, there's no other continent on earth that can say that, that can host that. And yet here we are sending our best and our brightest with what we can send them with to do great things, and they are, as you've attested to. And yet, we feel the need to sit here and cherry pick that, and you made a comment, but when we were off the air, uh, in terms of planning for the show and stuff, like there's certain things you just can't win, and that's not like the battlefield. That's the political conversation, and it's so disheartening when we know that we got these like the best and the brightest. If a guy was a sergeant E5 wheeled mechanic that got himself onto a special forces mission in Africa, dude must have been a stud. Like, he must have got himself the opportunity to earn his way there. Uh, no one knows better than you what it takes to get there and to earn your place, and the education that's involved that you go through. We're not talking about indoctrination. We're not talking about a quick little hey, like let's spool you up course. We're talking about a dedicated pipeline of education to take you to a different level, and that's what makes you so special. It's not that you're elitist; it's that you're educated, trained, and prepared, and you're a treasure that we have in our arsenal that can be utilized for these opportunities. And it's so interesting. It's so sad that when we get these opportunities, instead of rallying behind uh, our treasure chest and holding it up and lifting the lid and letting America look in to what we hold in that chest. That it's not just some notional thing that's buried in some island that's got some like cryptic map to it. We have a treasure chest of resources, of people, of abilities that we can hold up, open the lid to, and show the nation and be like, hey, in case of war, flip this latch. You don't want war? Flip this latch. You want to stop war in another place that's not ours? Flip this latch. And it's just so heartbreaking that this has all been reduced down to cheap political talking points. And like you said, you don't go to go. You don't like Donald Rumsfeld said. You don't go to war with the army you want. You go to war with the army you have, and not the one you like, the one you got. And making do with what you got. And unfortunately, like you said, for the past 8, 9 years, we've been dealing with, you know, what we have versus what we want. And you know, God bless those guys and in some case gals for being able to do that.
Yeah, Rusty, I think you could build on exactly that. One of the things you plan for and train for, I know through well, soldiers do in general, but especially in special forces, is to plan to conduct things with nothing. To plan to excuse me, to make things or give yourself multipliers out of not having the things that you want. Whether it's field expedient stuff, if it's something you have to make, or just, you know, hobble some things together and buy some stuff off the local market. Wouldn't you say that's kind of one of the key facets of the training for special forces?
Yeah, we've got a. I don't remember where the saying came from, so but I'll repeat it the way I remember it and the way I was taught. We, the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have for so long accomplished so much with so little. We're now qualified to do anything with nothing. That's what the special forces tell themselves every single day when they plan for any kind of mission, because you have to be prepared. You hope that you have everything that you request and lay on, but at the end of the day, you have to be prepared for and execute with nothing in the worst case scenario, because the mission doesn't change. You still have to accomplish your mission. In this particular case, we know it's a fact upon fact upon fact that radical Islam is spreading in places like Africa because we don't have a footprint there. We don't have exposure to the tribes and sub-tribes and the nations that are there. So we don't have any influence. That's exactly what happened in Afghanistan and Pakistan and, you know, Yemen and Chad and Somalia and all these places all over the world that are either going to be hotbeds or are hotbeds or have been hotbeds. The way that you combat that is you have people who are experts at working with host nation and indigenous forces to help them defend themselves, and you become in some part allies and friendly with those people so that they can maintain their autonomy, they can protect themselves and feed themselves. And that is what those guys were doing. That is the mission of FID encapsulated in a very short synopsis statement. One of the things that we have got to do a better job of, and I would tell you that a lot of the services have gotten out of, is the fact that we've got to trust our subordinates and empower our subordinates to be able to execute the missions that they're trained to do. So, you know, an officer has to be able to let his enlisted leaders conduct their missions, plan their missions, execute their training without a significant amount of interference, unless typically it's directed. That's a very simple concept that seems to be lost on people, because either A, they're trying to climb the career ladder, or B, they are risk averse, and thus you can't accomplish your mission. They've got to be able to, we've got to empower them to make decisions on their own. And that's what that team and that mission, I would guess if they were doing a FID mission, that's what they were there trying to do. And just because you are that force that's the tip of the spear in the remote ancient places of the world, sometimes those missions change. Sometimes things happen that, you go from thinking you're going to do a medcat medical capability exercise in a village to getting intelligence that there might be a bad guy that's coming through here. And you know that if you kill or capture him, that benefits your efforts because it reduces the enemy's ability to be operational in your battle space. Bottom line is that's that sort of stuff, the ever changing minute by minute dynamic of what happens on the battlefield of today, which is unconventional in nature, it's ancient in origin, it's tribal in its beliefs and its language and its culture. And you've got to be able to have guys that can go out there and work regularly and freely in that environment in order to be successful. Another thing people don't think through when they're trying to advance themselves by being the critic is the fact that what those guys are doing in that mission of foreign internal defense, by being a force multiplier and working with the host nation and indigenous forces, you now prevent the U.S. or any coalition or our allies from having to send combat forces to that theater of operations. And they are missing the very point, which is most important, that those guys are out there doing it so somebody else doesn't have to. If I can get, in one particular case, I taught an Afghan village elder how to write his name. That was it. He wanted to know how to write his name. And by doing that, he was willing to, like, literally go into the village and give me 10 or 15 young men to be in our force so that, we could provide safety and security to that village and that district. And it came from a very small trade-off with, a village leader, because that was what was important to them. That aspect is completely lost on all of these talking heads that are trying to make themselves look good in the public eye by being critics of what our mission is, because they've not taken the time to stop, shut up long enough to listen to what our mission is there, and realize that what they're doing prevents massive buildups of U.S. forces and massive amounts of money being pumped into these countries. That, in the end state, is what these guys were trying to accomplish. And all the other supporting missions and capabilities are what they're there doing. And they were doing a phenomenal job until, this particular incident happened. So again, I agree with General Kelly, is that I look at our society, and in so many areas, we have lost our respect for certain places and certain aspects of society that we hope to keep sacred. And the media seems to think that if they don't come out and attack the soldiers themselves, then that's okay. But the problem is they're questioning the organization's efforts, which are, many of them are directed by the previous administration. So there's that old saying, whenever you point your finger at somebody, you got 3 pointing back at yourself and 1 pointing up to the Lord. So, there's enough. If they're looking for blame, there's always somebody that they can fire if they want to. But at the end of the day, what those guys are doing is a noble mission. It's a credible mission. It's extremely important. And by trying to capitalize off of this incident, it tarnishes what they do. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms that leads to, Troy, what you were talking about earlier, where you get that commander of that organization that says, if we're just doing missions to go out and run these IED laden roads because somebody wants to say we're doing a presence patrol, that is not a good application of troops to task. Guys don't necessarily want to go out there and do things to say that they're doing them. They want a mission, an end state. They want a task and purpose that they can go out there and accomplish. And that's what these guys were doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. The one thing you said, the saying, you said you weren't sure where it came from. I think it may have came from the 60s, because I remember when my dad did his several tours in Vietnam during that time. Those guys were borrowing and stealing everything they could find as special forces in the 60s, because they were truly the bastard stepchildren of the military. If it wasn't for President Kennedy giving them some recognition, they probably would never have made it out of there. But so I think it goes way back, and I say that because I also want to kind of caveat into the awesome recognition, because one of the things we talked about tonight, right before we close, I want to cover this, is that special forces, silent professionals, a vast majority of the special operation forces do not go out looking for the book deal, the movie deal, and all that stuff. When you think about the number that are there and have served versus what's been done, or that are out there promoting themselves, but when you look at guys like Captain Mike Rose, who a medic who came up through the ranks and saved, they're crediting with saving 50 to 60 lives, being shot down in the last evac helicopter, continuing to save lives. Someone like that getting that recognition, which is so far overdue. Just any perspective on that? I mean, it was great. It was great to see a soldier be recognized, regardless of what branch or what they did. But to see a special forces medic who is truly has been a godsend, and they have, throughout the career of the history of special forces, they have done far and above and beyond what they were ever trained to do. I know that firsthand. Any thoughts on that and seeing him be recognized today in the White House? Or yesterday?
Well,
yesterday, I mean.
Well, first of all, it shouldn't take that long. Part of the problem is there's a litany of people who are in between the final awarding process and the people who are doing the recommending. And I don't think it matters what branch of service, but Colin Powell said one time that if you ask in the Army, if you ask enough people's permission, eventually somebody thinks it's their responsibility to tell you no. Well, it should never take that long to award someone an award that is so clearly defined as that individual being deserving of that award. And that's the same issue that we are facing. Funny you said that, because we are doing the same thing for Sergeant Voss. We're trying to get Sergeant Voss was a member of my team during Operation Medusa, and we submitted him. His actions were well deserving of the Medal of Honor. We put him in for the Medal of Honor, and somebody in our chain of command decided to, for political reasons, remove the packet and resubmit it as a Silver Star. Those guys deserve to be awarded the decorations that they earned. And here's another thing. I understand that there's a concern to protect those awards and their credibility and their sacredness, but what seems to be lost on a lot of our military leaders who are in that voting process is the fact that, number one, many of them have never served in the types of intense combat. Just because somebody sat in a fob in a talk does not mean that they were on the ground, walking those IED laden roads, getting ambushed in complex ambushes, fighting an insurgent enemy who's hiding amongst the population. But those people end up having a vote as to whether these guys deserve these awards or not. Politically, I'm sure from Vietnam, there were an unimaginable litany of reasons why that this award wasn't given long before now. But the truth is, when you think about it, with the size of our military, you have fewer people who are honestly having to do more heroic things because we don't have a larger force. Our active duty, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, not excluding the Coast Guard, but that force represents about 0.4% of the entire population of the U.S. military. That means at any one given time, you've got about 300,000 combatants. And if you've got 2/3 of your force forward and 1/3 of your force back in reserve, which has been the doctrine of warfare, you've got guys fighting with every ounce of life that they have in them for their brothers and sisters to the left and the right. And many of these awards are due these soldiers. I think another aspect that many of the critics and the talking heads who want to get involved in having and trying to publicize this mission and the loss of these American service members is the fact that when you look at as massive as our military budget is, how much of that is going towards the actual ground soldier, not hundreds of millions and billions being dumped into aircraft. But, several years ago, we were fighting to keep the A-10 alive. That is the preferred close air support aircraft for ground forces. And, the same, you've got members of the leader of the Air Force is trying to get rid of it because they want to funnel money into higher priority programs. And right now, that's not the fight that we're in. The fight that we're in is small, it's dynamic. Again, it's many times it's inconclusive because you get in a firefight and you can't see the enemy and you're having to pick and choose specifically when you fire, when you don't fire. Up until recently, there are complex rules of engagements that don't allow soldiers to utilize the tactics, techniques, and procedures and SOPs that they have trained on that are Army doctrine, because you can't reflexively fire if you've got an insurgent firing from a group of civilians or from a populated area. So the soldier chooses not to fire because the question becomes, or the young lieutenant in the 82nd, 101st, 10th Mountain Division, 3rd ID, do I call in close air support or do I not? Because if I do, and the wrong person gets a hold of this story, then all of a sudden I'm going to Leavenworth for 20 years because civilians got killed and somebody is looking for, a sacrificial lamb on the chopping block. So this stuff gets very convoluted very quickly. And I think a lot of the people that are now pointing fingers about why they're not getting the answers that they want or why the soldiers didn't get the resources they need, those people are on the committees to be able to tell the services where that money should be going. And it doesn't always need to be into building new buildings and headquarters and developing new infrastructure when you've got people on the ground that need advanced equipment in order to stay ahead of a very rudimentary insurgency that can melt into the population.
It's such a complex issue, yet so simple at the same time. But you've been listening to Stu and the Nunn talking with Rusty Bradley, a retired Special Forces Major, Army Special Forces Major, and he's been enlightening us on the importance of the Foreign Internal Defense Mission and what the actual call of the Army Special Forces units are and what they do, and why we need to respect what they do and understand what they do. Rusty, thanks for coming on. We're always just honored to have you on. You can follow Rusty on Twitter at Lions of Kandahar. Earlier tonight, I tagged at Rusty Bradley 74, and he responded with, "While I'm not that hero, I respect him greatly." So the other Rusty Bradley that's out in the world is a big fan of yours. But we look forward to hearing about your new upcoming book. Lions of Kandahar is on the shelves now. Please go on Amazon. Please go out and get it. As well as look forward to Rusty coming back in a little bit to tell us more about the upcoming projects. Rusty, we greatly appreciate everything you've done. I know your leadership within the Army has made a big impact. I got to see it myself as when you were a PL, one of your privates, a guy by the name of John Kaiser came and worked with me. And so I've seen the fruits of your labor. I'm a fan. I know Stu is too. And we really appreciate you coming on and talking with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you guys for your service. And, please tell your listeners, thank you for being the country we're fighting for.
Amen.
Thank you absolutely. Thank you so much, Rusty. Thank you, Toby. Everyone, again, be sure and join us next Tuesday. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. Correction. I need to put this administrative announcement out. We will not be here next Tuesday. It is Halloween. There's be kids coming to the door, and Toby has to dress up as, I don't know what he's dressing up as, but so we got next Tuesday is Halloween. We know a lot of you are going to be dealing with that, and your children and kids coming by. So we're gonna hold off on next week's show, give you a break, but we'll be returning the Tuesday after, and we'll be looking forward to you join us here on Stu and the Nunn Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. So go ahead and modify your calendars. We won't be here next Tuesday. Enjoy the kids, enjoy the candy. But after that, we'll be back, and we've got some great guests coming up as we march toward our 100th episode. And we are planning some great stuff for our 100th episode in November. So with that being said, Rusty, as Toby said, thank you so much, my brother. And Toby, you too. And everyone, we hope you guys have a great night.
Good night. Thanks, mate.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Stu and the Nunn Radio. We hope you enjoyed your time with us because we have enjoyed sharing our time with you. Be sure to check out stewandthenunn.com in addition to asking us questions and interacting with us on our Facebook page and Twitter. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern here on Spreaker and Facebook Live. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Warrior Media Solutions, BlueHammer.com, Veteran Outdoors, Graybeard Publishing, and Mighty Oaks Warrior Foundation. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Thank you again, and have a good night.